when I started Goodphyte in beginning of February, my inflammation in my feet went down almost immediately, like within 3 or 4 days.
In this long format episode of Reclaimed, Goodphyte founder Amy Puzey interviews her friend and former coach, Sandra Yaworski. Sandra was an elite runner and running coach for 25 years. She was stricken by crippling and extremely painful rheumatoid arthritis. She tells Amy her story and the effects of recently starting Goodphyte. Sandra shares her inflammatory biomarkers before and after taking Goodphyte, and this graph shows her C-reactive protein and platelet counts went from extremely high back to the normal range after several weeks on Goodphyte.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Amy.
Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. A little bit nervous, but also feel I need to tell a story. So I'm glad to be here.
I'm always nervous with this stuff. So I want to introduce you from my perspective, just because people don't necessarily know, but you were a coach of mine, I think for 3 years. I'm trying to remember, but quite a while ago. So Sandra is a very competitive was a very competitive athlete, an amazing elite athlete, and coached myself, and then continues to coach. I think you've been coaching for about 25 years now.
Yeah, 25 years this year. Yeah.
So hundreds of athletes. I think
Thousands.
thousands.
Literally, yeah.
And I think everybody in Alberta knows you for sure. And Calgary certainly. Sandra's a very strong person. So Sandra, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about your background and in coaching and running. And I'd love to hear more about where this all started for you.
Yeah. So I started coaching in 2001. That was a year I turned 40 and kind of was transitioning from being a high performance athlete into the next phase of my life. I had sort of dabbled in coaching while I was a high performance athlete, but more to learn and be mentored by other coaches, knowing that eventually it would be something that I would want to do full time, and I just didn't know when that would occur. So started in 2001 when I was in Calgary. Prior to that, I was sort of in Edmonton and then quite a bit in the States. That's where I did a lot of training. And in 2015, I left the corporate world and decided to coach full time. So I guess that's 11 years that I've been coaching. That's been my primary occupation. It just was a good transitionary time for me to do that. I felt I got what I needed to be financially secure from the corporate world, and I wanted to follow my love of coaching and helping people. And it's been an absolutely rewarding period for me. And I hope to be one of those coaches that, I'm 80 years old and I die coaching. That's basically what I want to do, because as long as your mind is sharp and you're still able to help and move the equation for people to improve, I want to continue to do that. I love it. It's rewarding. I get so many gifts from it, I guess. I feel that coaching is an honorable thing to do because you open up people, that you see their vulnerabilities, you see them grow, and you see them to do things that they never thought possible. That's a huge gift. Yeah, I don't.
It is.
Is there anything else you want me to add to that?
Well, no, I think that's as somebody who was coached by you, I'm sure I said to you, I can't do that a number of times. And you probably said, just do it. And then I did it. And I was like, whoa, how? Like, you just don't think you can run that fast.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear, like, what do you feel you get out of coaching? You said gifts. Like, tell me about some of those. I know you sort of just said that, but if you can expand on that a little.
Yeah. When people, there's people who come to me that uh, have never been athletic, and they don't think that they could run fast, and they don't even they have these horrible biomechanics, but somehow um, they improve so much, and they do things that they never thought possible, and just the what you see of how important that accomplishment was for them is is just overwhelming in terms of emotionally for me. And then there's the athlete who's come to me who has been a runner, and they haven't been able to move the needle, and all of a sudden they get exposed to something different, and then the needle moves a lot. There's people who've been stuck, and I'll just like throw out some numbers, but who've been stuck in running, say, a 1:26 half marathon for forever. And then they train with me for, say 6 months, and they continue on after, but after that 6 month period, they all of a sudden are running 121. Um, and it's huge. It's a huge jump. Like, I mean, and it's like, you got there, and there's more to come, right? Maybe the
I went from like I feel like I was around 130, 128 maybe, and you got me down to like a 122
three,
half.
122, 123,
That
yeah.
was in Calgary too, so that was like at elevation. I don't know that I did one at, but yeah, your your method was, and training with a group, and you have this quiet like strength about you when you coach, and you're not yelling, you're not like rah rah, you're very like, yeah, thanks, just do it. I I was clear, just do what I told you, and you'll see
Yeah.
results.
I hear that a lot. I don't know what that quiet strength is, but uh it just it tells me I'm doing the right thing. And you know, I, y- as you know, when we're children growing up, we hear that we have so many influences of different people in our life outside of our parents, and coaches are a big thing with that. And I think even as adults, we continue to have strong mentors, and I'm happy to be one of those people. And um, I've had people that I've coached for 8 to 12 years, and so I've seen them from being young adults in their 20s to, you know, getting in their 30s, getting married and have children. And I've seen all of that. And it's like, go to their weddings and just be part of their life. It's incredibly rewarding. Um,
Well, and,
I
and
think
you
that
talk to someone that you talk to probably daily, whether it's text or email, or maybe not daily. I would probably try not to bug my coach too much, but
I encourage it.
you check in a lot. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
communication with someone, and it's yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's, well, I couldn't do this workout because this happened in my life, or I did do this workout and it went really well, or you're in pretty regular communication with your coach.
Yeah.
It's like having a best friend like close by all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun.
Um, did you, in terms of who was an inspirational coach for you? I'm curious. Who is your most inspirational coach?
Um, I had two really great coaches, John Birmingham and Al Weicker. And they helped me at different points in my journey of running. Um, John was an Australian guy, lived in Edmonton for there for a short time. I think John coached me for about 3 years. And when I met John, it was at a indoor track meet, and I was in the stands watching a friend, and he came over to me and said, I'd like to coach you. I think that you have a lot of potential. And so I started the journey with him, and yeah, he coached me to my first marathon. I think I ran 2:52 in my first go. Um, and then I eventually moved on from John to L, and L was he coached a couple of different clubs, St. Albert Track and Field Club, and also the University of Alberta cross country and track team. And he had a different process, and he took me to increasing my mileage from 65 miles a week to over 100 miles a week. Just developed me and became just a really strong runner. And so I owe him in terms of teaching me patience and, just wanting it and doing the different stages that you need to do. So he really taught me how to be a process-oriented athlete. And that is fundamentally how I coach now, is getting people to understand that everything takes time. And, in running and endurance, you can't be working on, increasing your mileage and getting faster at the same time. You need to increase your mileage and then move back to speed. There's just and it all takes time, and it requires patience. And I always kind of encourage people to allow themselves to go through that journey instead of rushing it, because that leads to injuries and setbacks. And sometimes you may never come back from those. So I think, I owe that to L. And in terms of, making people believe in themselves, I think I got that from John. Yeah.
Okay, and now brag about yourself a little. I know that's not something you do, but tell us your marathon times, your 10K times. Like, what are your PRs for all of those events? Because you are
Yeah.
absolutely
My marathon time is 2:39:38. My 10K time 35:08. 5K time 17:03. My half marathon 78:28. Those are sort of my big nuggets. Uh, it's interesting that I ran my personal best uh, in the 5K on the road in Phoenix, Arizona. It was the highest mileage week of my career. I ran 130 miles that week and had the 5K race as a Sunday run, coming off of that high mileage week. And I ran this, I actually won the race outright. Uh, Both men and women. And yeah, so it's, ran 17:03 off of that 130-mile week. Yeah, crazy.
imagine if you had not just done a 130-mile week, how fast you could have gone.
Um, I'm not sure. I I could run really well under high mileage. I didn't do well with huge tapers. I think because of the high mileage. Uh, and I just was just so strong. And I was really lean, and not that I didn't get lean because of nutrition. I got lean just because of the natural process. I was a huge eater. Yeah, when I ran the 17:03, I kind of thought, I wonder what I could be, if I actually trained for a 5K, what that would look like. But I just had the marathon bug. Wanted to make, try to make the standard for Olympics, and I never got there, but I sure tried hard. Yeah.
I was going to ask because that seems like an OTQ, the Olympic trial qualifier. Would that not be fast? Or
At that time, no. So at that time, the standard was like, it's not like it is today where they publish it for Canada. So Canada's standards is usually, it's a lot harder than, say, a standard for a developing country. So there'd be the Olympic standard that is set by the International Federation, and then there's a country standard. And Canada has moved to like almost, I think it's a top 12 or top 14 time in the world in rankings for standard. In my era, they would publish it, and sometimes they would change it, and so that there was less emphasis on wanting to field a team on the endurance side. Um, Whereas today there is that emphasis. So it was 2:35 in my time. So I was 4 minutes off that qualified standard. Yeah.
close.
Close, but so far away.
Yeah.
And then you're not guaranteed to go. You then have to be picked, selected. So yeah.
I've got a list of questions here, so I'm gonna reference it. So I think we've gone through some of that, but one of the main reasons that we wanted to talk to you today was because of your journey with Goodphyte, and that has to do with your rheumatoid arthritis. Um, so you were diagnosed about 20 years ago. Um, Walk us back to that moment and what your symptoms were leading into it. Did you notice something before being diagnosed? How far in advance? Tell us about how that all started for you, especially as an athlete running, that many
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed November 2002. And I literally woke up, and my hands, my fingers were huge. My thumbs were like literally 3 times the size. And my feet were swollen, and I felt like I was in a body cast in terms of my torso. So I didn't know what it was. I went into emergency, and they did some blood tests, and they came back, and they told me I had rheumatoid arthritis, and I had no clue what that was. And so they referred me to a specialist. I forget how long it took me to get into the specialist. Um, and I started my journey around medications, and I was lucky at that time. I had a young doctor who basically moved me into getting onto a biologic fairly quickly. So there's a process, in Alberta. I don't know if that process is the same as when it was back when I was diagnosed, but they they put you on a series of drugs that are not that great for you. So I have a lot of different side effects. So my doctor really expedited that process to get me on to a biologic. Um, and so I think within 6 months, I was on a biologic. I was in my initial flare for 18 months. And The biologic started working quite quickly. I was able to, during that 18 months, I wasn't able to be active. My feet were just too swollen. When we have flares, everything is about protecting the joints. So you don't want to do anything that would aggravate the joints and cause permanent damage. And so going running is just not an option. Lifting weights is not an option. you want to focus more on mobility. Yeah, so 18 months in that initial flare. And then when I came out of it, I kind of shifted to moving back into being active, did a lot of cycling, and decided that I wanted to do Ironman a couple times. I did that. And so running and cycling kind of became my thing. I just wasn't able to go back to, either because of aging and rheumatoid arthritis, maybe a combination of the both, but I wasn't able to go back to that high mileage. I was still able to run decently, even at, I think, between age 45 and 48, I was still able to run under 40 minutes for a 10K as somebody with a chronic disease. But I just didn't get to the point where I would allow myself to go as deep as I did when I was a highly competitive runner. It was about always not wanting to experience that flare again, and the amount of pain that you go through when you're in flares. Yeah,
Can you describe the pain a little bit for people who don't understand that? Like,
it's relentless. I think that if I think back to like recently, between my current flare started towards the end of 2024. Between sort of December and March 2025, it was intense. From about mid-February to the end of March, I was in the fetal position most days. And like it was my 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 nervous system, because of the amount of inflammation, was being pressured. So you have this nerve pain, which becomes really relentless. And you have this your joints are so inflamed that every movement, anything you try to do hurts. You can't, right. For me, my nervous system was so bad that the tips of my fingers, that if I touched things, it would just send this radiating nerve pain all the way up my arms. Like it was just awful. And then my sciatic became pressured, so every movement hurt. My neck, I couldn't move it, and I struggled walking. I struggled. I couldn't wipe my own bum. Like that's really what it was. I'd have to, you know, hop into the shower after having a bowel movement because I couldn't, from two aspects. I didn't have the mobility to actually reach, and I also just couldn't touch. Um, so everything became hard. I couldn't do everything that we take for advantage every day. Um, Trying to cut something, like even opening, like when the way oat drinks and milk come now, with the little knob, I couldn't open it. Um, and I couldn't drive. I couldn't touch my steering wheel, and I didn't even have the strength to turn the wheel. Um, so, because I mean, you didn't have the strength, and you're just in so much pain from the inflammation and then the nerve pieces. And
and pain
then, of course,
helping with
sorry.
this. Sorry, like pain meds weren't even touching this. They put you on pain meds, and that wasn't
Oh,
helping.
yeah. So, I was hospitalized in March of 2025, and I was I thought I was a baby. Like I literally, I struggled to talk about the pain I was in, and I thought I wasn't strong enough. And I coached so many nurses and doctors, and it was the convincing that they did that I needed to go into emergency. And I have an internal medicine doctor that I coach, who helped me immensely to expedite me getting into Foothills Emergency and then getting into the internal medicine ward and being there. And uh, so I was in the hospital for a week. They did every test you could imagine under the sun because they thought I had an infection, and they were searching for that infection. And between the on-call RA doctor, the internal medicine doctor, two internal medicine doctors actually, and a cardiologist, they were pretty certain I had an infection in my heart. They couldn't find anything, and I was released from the hospital. So when you're also to get out of that immense pain, you're given a Kenalog shot, which is a high dosage of steroid. So it's 80 milligrams, and it's a full body steroid injection. So they inject you in the butt, and that provides relief, but that relief only lasts for 4 to 6 weeks. So I had, I think, 3 or 4 Kenalog shots over the 2025 to get me out of that intense pain. And at the same time, they were trying different biologics. They felt that the current biologic I was on wasn't working, so I was switched 3 times to different biologics, and I would have a Kenalog shot, change the biologic, and then the Kenalog shot would wear off, and then the biologic, it was then once that Kenalog shot wore off, get to the 3-month period, and then I wasn't improving, and so then go through that process again. So I went through that process 3 times. And each time it's like that pain comes back. And so I was in emergency 2 more times, 3 more times, I guess. And each time, because I couldn't manage the amount of pain I was in, um, you know, I couldn't even put my socks on because my feet were so swollen, but more importantly, I couldn't pull the sock with my hands. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah,
I can't. It
it's
does. It's
yeah,
hard.
it's hard for, I think, for people to grasp that, because I when I going through it, I couldn't grasp it. Um, and so every time you try to do things, and you're in this state of helplessness, and I mean, it would bring me to tears because um, I was so strong as an athlete, that here you are all of a sudden not capable, and that's really hard. Um, yeah, it even I would do my mobility, like get onto the floor. It'd take me a long time to get onto the floor. And there's only so many things you can do when you can't put pressure on your hands. But then it would take me so long to get off the floor. And sometimes it would be such a struggle. I'd just sit there and bawl my eyes out because it was so frustrating. And I know that there's people who go through far worse things. And And I think knowing that there are people who go through far worse things in some ways motivated me to just kind of keep pushing. Uh, and then I may jump just a little bit ahead, but in December, I was in probably the darkest place. I didn't really move a lot, and I was really questioning whether, if this was the life I really wanted. And somewhere over Christmas, uh, I just pulled myself together and decided, and I'm not a big New Year's resolution person, but I made the decision that however hard it was going to be, that I was going to get on my indoor trainer on my bike and pedal. And it took me a half an hour to get on my bike. But I pedaled, and I think I was able to pedal for like 10 minutes. And then took me a long time to get off my bike because couldn't use my hands. I had to use my forearms. And lifting my leg over the seat was a struggle. I thought I was going to like pop the trainer over, fall on my concrete floor and break something, which would be even a worse situation. But I committed to trying to regain some control. And yeah, I think there was that shift. And then I decided to start, in, I think, mid-November, I started to write about it, which was, I started it because I did it for therapeutic reasons, and then I published them. I decided to go through publishing them and letting the world know. I felt, um, I needed to do that for two reasons, I think. One, because it's frustrating when people don't understand what rheumatoid arthritis is. It's amazing to me that people just don't know what it is. They don't realize it's an autoimmune disease. And the other thing is just I was a bit embarrassed of how incapable I was, and I felt that if I just told the world that when they saw me struggling, walking, doing tasks, that they know what the situation was. And so it kind of relieved me from being embarrassed about being incapable. Sorry,
So
a little emotional.
sorry. I I'm so glad you did write that because I didn't know. I don't think you ever mentioned it. And you would have had it when you were coaching me. And I had no idea. And I read that post and it like physically hurt me to know how much pain you were in. And we hadn't even been in touch. It's hard to hear you. Like, even now, I didn't realize how much pain you were in. But I'm glad you did, because I wouldn't have reached out. So
Yeah,
it's
I
suffering.
been so lucky. You reached out. I mean, people. What I learned through this process is that people want to help; they just don't know how. And so when you talk about not being able to do things, people offered to. Some people didn't even offer; they would just show up and cut things for me, bring food, drive me places, and during that most of 2025 was hard it was like a horrible year, and being able to see my athletes was not possible at times, because I couldn't, in the winter, I couldn't wear shoes. So I wasn't able to get out. But as this process started, in this flare, before my feet had swelled up, I was in pain walking, but my feet weren't such that, excuse me, that I couldn't wear shoes. And I would show up to practice, and they would see me at my weakest moments. And that was emotional for them. um, it brought a lot of people to tears. Brought me to tears. um, so I think it's hard to watch people that you care about go through that kind of level of difficulty, and also just the trial and error with drugs is just so hard, because you hope that this is the one. This is the one that's going to work. So yeah, so I was on, between that initial flare and this flare, rheumatoid arthritis for me was just sort of, when you say no one knew, it just was basically, I was in such a good place. Like it didn't impact me. Um, it was dormant, and I would fatigue more easily. I had limitations in terms of how much stress I could put on my immune system. And but for the most part, it was non-existent. And the turning point was sort of, I think, what caused this flare. I picked up a virus back in that September, October 2024. And my immune system just went crazy. It couldn't fight that virus, and the likelihood that I had some type of infection, because when I was hospitalized, for 3 days, I was on antibiotics, all by the bag. They were treating me for an infection, even though they couldn't figure out where. And my blood test came back that I had an infection. It's just that they just couldn't locate it in my body. The only thing that they did find was I had a lesion on my lungs, and then a three month follow-up CT scan that ended up just being scar tissue. Anyway, infection, virus, plus there had been a year or two prior to that, there had been a switch by the Alberta government, pretty much at every province and most of the countries, actually. Biologics, live culture biologics, are highly expensive, and there was a switch to move to synthetic. And so I was moved to a synthetic biologic. And a lot of the studies coming out of Europe, because they've been on synthetic biologics a lot longer than, say, Canada, United States, show that people who've been on the original drugs for more than 10 years, those synthetic biologics don't work. And so that's what I went through, is tried 3 different synthetic drugs that didn't work. And then now getting an approval to go back to a live culture biologic, Enbrel. So that's the original drug I was on. That's the drug I'm on now. And so it's been proven that long-term usage of a live culture, the protein molecules just attack differently with the synthetic drugs versus the live biologics. And so I'm grateful that I'm back on that original. It's the jury's out whether I'm going to be moving the needle to stay on this drug, but I'm hopeful.
And when did you start that one? When were you put back on the Enbrel?
I have to actually look. So I think it was October. Yeah, October. Yeah, I think I've been on it October, November, December, January, February. Yeah, 6 months now. And then they added it at the end of February, methotrexate as well. So I do a methotrexate injection, which is a disease-modifying drug. It's used in a lot of different diseases. It's highly effective with rheumatoid arthritis. I'll be on that drug short-term meaning maybe a year. So I do that injection on Sundays, and then I do my biologic Enbrel injection on Tuesdays. And I still on anti-inflammatories, but not to the extent that I was. So I've been trying to test the waters a bit, actually since starting Goodphyte. So when I started Goodphyte in beginning of February, you know, my inflammation in my feet went down almost immediately, like within 3 or 4 days. And my inflammation and my fatigue level changed. And so I started to test the waters with the anti-inflammatory because it's so bad for your gut. So I was on twice a day anti-inflammatory. Then I moved to one, and now I'm taking it only when I'm feeling that the inflammation is just not where it needs to be. Um, uh, yeah. So a lot of things. Can I just jump in and tell you a little bit about Goodphyte? Yeah.
Yeah, tell us
So
when
yeah.
it started, I guess, and what made you willing to try it? Because I kind of did you a little
Well,
bit.
you reach out um, and I, you know, it was the timing was great because I already started to look at reading a lot more about gut health, and I've never had like stomach issues, but I started to read about the bacteria in the gut, and the linkages with all uh, chronic diseases, or autoimmune diseases. And so I just went, yeah, it just makes sense to me. And, and I trusted that you wouldn't put a product out in the market if you didn't believe in it. So those two things combined just moved me to say, yeah, I'm going to try this. And uh, so I feel it's been working for me. Um, and I feel it's been working for me. Um, Mixture of the morning. So I'll take 4 with that, and then I'll take 2 in the evening with my evening meal. And that's been working fairly well for me. I weigh 115 pounds, so I feel that dosage is about right. I may experiment with going a little higher and see what's happening. But I'm at 6 right now. Yeah.
Okay.
And I made the move to that forward to maybe 2 weeks ago, upon your suggestion of just maybe doing a higher dosage with the meal that has higher grain product
Yeah.
in it. Yeah.
Okay. And was there a difference, do you feel, going from 4 to 6 tablets? Do you think there's been an improvement at all?
Yeah, I think that's when I started to see my bowel movement change dramatically,
Mhm.
both from the texture and uh, the volume, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
Like I can't believe how much that initial bowel movement in the morning, like it's big, which tells me that stuff is clearing out of me. Um,
That's great.
and my just my energy level has been a lot better with the change. Yeah.
And do you so from before starting Good Fight to now, if you could rate your energy on a scale of 1 to 10, what was it before and what would you say it's at now?
Yeah. I say 0 before, like, because I mean, I didn't have a lot of wake hours, right?
Yeah.
I was awake maybe 8 hours of the day, right? To now, uh, like if my body would work, I, if I did, still didn't have, uh, a bit of inflammation and my joints, because like, particularly my feet, because I have not used my feet. The, they've weakened so much. Like I
Mm.
wasn't able to use them for like 12 weeks. I was not moving my feet. So feet propel everything up, like carries our whole body. So the tendons and the be able to move in different directions is just not there right now. So
Yeah.
um, I think so now if all that was gone, my energy would be, probably 9 out of 10. Uh, like in the ability to do things. I want to do those things. So I would say my energy shifted from 0 to 9. But I just not at a stage where I could move the way I want. So but I can on the bike because you're clipped in. Once you're clipped in, you're moving. I just don't have the amount of oxygen coming into my system to be able to push to where I would like to push. Uh, but I'm doing like I'm on the bike, I think 4 hours a week now. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
One thing we just talked about off camera, but when you talked about the virus, that I don't know if they ever identified which virus it was, but the virus triggered the flare. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were talking about, and this makes a lot of sense because there are a lot of autoimmune diseases that they've linked to Epstein-Barr virus, um, and in one of the theories that we have with Good Fight is that when the virus enters the body, um, your body sends cytokines in to try to clear the virus, and it's like acute inflammation. And similar to COVID, where the virus gets in, and then people were dying of the cytokine storm, not of the virus. And so what happens is the cytokines come in and they turn on, but somehow they're just not turning off. And so it the cytokines then were attacking the lungs and the kidneys, and that was killing people. Um, and I one of the theories that we have, and it is just a theory right now, but that we'd like to have tested, is that phytase seems to be acting as an off switch. So phosphatases turn things off, and kinases turn things on. And so when a virus enters and the body turns on inflammation, if there is a lack of phosphatase enzyme or a lack of enough phosphate or phosphorus in the body, which if it's all bound up in that IP6 and the phytic acid and unable to be broken down, you don't have enough source of phosphate. You don't even have enough phosphate to make ATP, which is your energy, right? And the amount of energy you need for your brain to function or for you to have any energy. If it's all bound into that phytic acid, the IP6, you don't have access to the phosphate. So I wonder sometimes if that's what's happening, is that the virus triggers a flare,
Right.
and some people stay in a flare. And I think, because we've seen this across so many different autoimmune diseases, and people's energy change so quickly, or their inflammation go down so quickly, um, the rapidity of how quickly this enzyme works is just that it liberates all that phosphate, and seems to just kind of be working as an off switch. So it is consistent to hear that you had that virus trigger the flare. Um, and maybe what happened is that the phytase then just seemed to be that off switch to start turning off the inflammation. And so, yeah, 12 weeks not using your feet, there'd be some atrophy of the muscles, right? And so I'm sure as you're building this back up and you're working really hard at regaining strength, that hopefully you can get back to the place where, I mean, the fact that you were skipping and running is really amazing. It must have felt great. Even 10 minutes to be able to run would feel.
Yeah, it was really slow, Amy. It was like 7.5 minute kilometer, but um,
That's slow for
it was
you.
a running
That's not
motion.
slow to a lot of people.
So yeah, so yeah, I think it's just about like my when people said like, what does it feel like? I said, well, those first initial steps really are painful, but it's because there's still a bit of inflammation in that ankle joint, but they're locked up is really what it comes down to. So that it's your tendons attached to your bone, so it's like those tendons have not worked. So I'm feeling I'm feeling all those tendons suffering, right? Like big time. So yeah, I could almost do calf raises comfortably. Um, so once I start to build that and to build that strength back, I hope to try again, go back to the ready. But yeah, it's just not quite ready yet. Uh,
It's almost like, I think I've heard the expression motion is lotion. And for an
yeah,
athlete, when I was talking to my dad on the weekend, I had a couple weeks of just insanity w- up until a few days ago, and I said something about my back being a little sore or being tired, and why I was talking to my dad, and he said, "Well, why do you exercise when you're tired? Why don't you just rest?" And and to somebody who isn't an athlete, they don't necessarily understand that exercise gives you energy. And
yeah,
it's not the type of workout that's going to bury you. I'm not going out and sprinting 800s, or, but if I don't move, I feel worse. And and so when you
yeah,
talk, saying something to somebody that's on the floor, sometimes getting your blood moving, and the toxins that are released from your body when you move, um, through breath and through sweat and through bowels, those are three pathways of elimination. So if you can activate two of them by exercising, you start to feel better. And a lot of people just don't get that. But half an hour, even if I can sweat, that was one of the things in pregnancy that near the end with twins, I missed breathing hard and sweating. You miss that because you don't feel as.
yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, I think if it's, I realize it's not possible for everybody when they're in that much pain, but um, yeah, I think if you can move within reason, just those. There's taker workouts when you would know this as an elite athlete. The taker workouts destroy you, and then you're crushed for the rest of the day, and you're on the couch and you don't want to do anything else, no matter what you eat for recovery food. And then there's giver workouts that are just,
yeah,
you go for a jog with your friends. It's super easy, and it just makes you feel so much better. You get so much energy from it, and it doesn't crush you for the next 3 days. It doesn't bury you.
absolutely. Yeah, run a marathon, but get out and walk the next day
Yeah.
because the muscle soreness will go away. Um, my bowel movements have been quite watery, and I don't have that anymore. I have like solid poo, um, and it looks like I started to look at pictures of what your poo is supposed to look like, and yeah, it's supposed to kind of look like a sausage, and like corn on the cob almost. And now I look at my poo and I have that. And so so that tells me my gut is improving. And what's great about now, when you have access to your medical information, a lot of times before the doctors do. So my blood tests, seeing them, and I've learned more about blood tests, and I'm still, learning a lot. But uh, uh, my markers started to change, and so my inflammatory markers moved into positive. So we talk about C-reactive protein and the platelet levels. They were so high, but within a month of Goodphyte, they moved into the normal range and well into the normal range
And
because they were so high.
can you contextualize? Because I I just want to tell a bit of what you told me. So I think, can you give us some numbers? Because I know that was one thing they couldn't figure out, why your CRP was so high and nothing was working. And then you started Goodphyte, and just to summarize, so the inflammation in your feet went down, I think within 4 days. You were out for a walk, which meant you could put your shoes on. And then, so from the time you started to the time your CRP went down, can you give us those numbers of where?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give you the numbers without looking them up. So I'm not, I kind of look at the graph and the normal range. So, um, so the CRP was, like I said, really high. And same with the platelet levels. And then things just dropped. Like the curve went from being sharp to like down. Like it was a severe drop. And so it's been normal. And then my hemoglobin is still not in the normal range. Uh, it's not terribly below normal, but it's enough to uh, that I notice like my breathing. Like I can't do, like, if I try when I try to do something harder on the bike, my breathing is just not there. And just to give you an idea, like my functional threshold on the bike when I was fit was like 167, and my functional threshold is now 115. So it just tells you that I'm just not making uh, red blood cells that are efficiently carrying oxygen. So I'm inflammatory anemic. And I'm hoping, I just had a blood test on Friday. It's the hemoglobin is kind of fluctuating at just a little bit, up and down, but it's still in that abnormal range. But I'm hoping that for my next blood test, that I will see a change. Uh, Now that the inflammatory markers are in the normal range. So
And you
when
were,
we have inflammation in our body, like even if you were to, um, you know, if I, tested those same markers when I was at an elite level as an athlete, you would see, your C-reactive protein, because it's an inflammatory marker. So the inflammation can be caused by disease or just by other things in life, right? You would see that CRP kind of fluctuating and changing. And but when you're have an inflammatory disease, that CRP is what they kind of rely on to measure the amount of inflammation in your body. Um, and then other markers kind of follow suit. Like there's some that move together. So platelet levels and CRP move together. Hemoglobin and hematocrit move together. Hematocrit has just moved into the positive normal zone. Yeah, so I think like with Goodphyte, if we go back to that, so I talked about my poo and it changing, but also the CRP and the hemoglobin and moving and changing tells me that I'm absorbing minerals and vitamins a lot better, and I owe that to Goodphyte, because the drugs I'm uh, they're hard on your gut. And so I feel like I need a mechanism to be able to absorb what I need to be able to get better, right? And it's a bit of food and it's a bit of Goodphyte, right? So I look at food differently now. I think you were going to ask this question, but I look at food differently now. You know, when I was before, it was I just need to eat because in order to run and bike, I need to just eat stuff, right? And sure, eat a lot of carbs, but now I look at foods as, what are my anti-inflammatory foods
Mhm.
that I need to be consuming?
Mhm.
So that's how I look at food now, is from an anti-inflammatory lens. Yeah, so and lucky for me, like, my diet has pretty much always been uh more of that anti-inflammatory foods. But I think now there's, based on some of the recommendations that you gave me of eliminating some stuff
Mhm.
that even may help with iron, but getting rid of it. So spinach and uh, dairy. Um, so I've started to eliminate those. You picked up on a few things in terms of me having sort of nasal congestion, and suggested that maybe I eliminate dairy, and that would relieve that. So I've noticed some changes in terms of that. I don't have as much phlegm, um, which is common for an RA person too, because it affects rheumatoid arthritis affects everything, right? Your connective tissue, your joints, your respiratory system, your heart, your kidneys. Like, you don't die of rheumatoid arthritis. You die of kidney or liver failure or heart disease. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's all muscles.
Just to go back, I think, and I just had this from the info you sent. I think your CRP levels at one point were 13 point something,
Okay,
and
yeah,
it down to I think the most recent blood work I had seen was in the fours. Uh, and I can't remember hematocrit, but just for context here, I just wanted to, and I don't know the exact time period, but I think it was within a month or two
yeah,
that
yeah,
changed, which is great. So I mean, there's the numbers in the blood work that tell that story of inflammation, and then there's also just how you feel and your energy and physically feeling like you could do something. And I think you told me, you were able to bike more, you were able to do some sprints on the bike, and you're like, oh, I only did 60 minutes, and I'm like, wow, that's most of what I do in a day. Like, I don't compete anymore, but that a lot of people, that's a big work
yeah,
to do a full hour.
yeah,
Not for someone who's been an elite athlete, but it's still pretty incredible that you were able to add some of that in. And your diet was very, I think you had a lot of oatmeal, from what I remember, oatmeal and lentils. And my reason for recommending taking the spinach out was because of the oxalates in it. And then dairy can be very congestive. But you have an amazing, like, your diet is so clean. It's so incredible, but it it is very high phytic acid. And and that can contribute to, from what we're seeing, it can contribute to autoimmune. And the lectins in the lentils and, some of those beans and nuts and seeds, the lectins, um, there's some research around molecular mimicry, and so that can trigger autoimmune reactions. So that was
great.
by adding the phytase in. Um, it actually turns that food from being kind of almost like a poison in your body because of what it's doing to becoming a medicine in your body. And that's what we're learning more is the butyrate release and all the phosphate that's released from the phytic acid that you're consuming actually becomes medicinal in your body. So your diet potentially was hurting you before, and now it's become healing just by
Yeah.
phytase. So
Yeah.
it's a combination. I mean, your diet is amazing.
Thanks.
Just need a phytase
Yeah.
there to make it beneficial for you. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fatigue thing too is like, I was sleeping like literally 16 hours a day. I couldn't get enough sleep. And I would I sleep 10 to 12 hours straight and then have to sleep, another 2 to 4 hours in the afternoon just to get through. And so when I started to take phytase, it was that equation changed. So I haven't had a nap for a long time now, since taking phytase. So I still sleep, I go to bed between 9 and 9:30 and I don't set an alarm. So I usually up between 6:30 and 7. So I'm still getting a lot of sleep. Um, but I don't require additional sleep. So that's been a huge change since taking phytase. And the thing is that my activity level has also increased during the time. And I don't have one of the biggest changes. So we talked about, the poo, the fatigue, and then there was this, it was so hard for me to concentrate. So when I would have to work to do programs, it would it would take me so much longer because I just struggled to concentrate. Like I just, they talk about brain fog, and I don't think I ever really understood what that was, but I literally just couldn't see clearly. Like it just, I just couldn't think the way I could normally think. Um, and so that was the third change that I saw with taking Goodphyte Phytase. And yeah, so now like my concentration levels are back to where they are. In fact, I feel that I'm more mentally aware.
Mhm.
And I think I told you, I texted you, uh, I forget if I went for a walk. I can't remember outside of the first one, but a longer one maybe. Um, and it was cloudy outside. It was raining, but the sun was shining for me. Like literally, it was like because that brain fog had just it went away, and it was like it was just I could I could feel life again. I guess I could feel being outside being enjoyable again, even though can't ride my bike outside. I can't run, but I could go for short walks. Yeah, it's just I feel alive again. I guess I'm more motivated to flip the coin on this and get back to doing things that I want to do. Um,
I remember when you texted me that you said like it feels like a fog had lifted even though it was kind of rainy outside. And I didn't realize that that was that day that it was gone after that. Like it didn't come back. It
yeah,
So that's
yeah,
great to hear that. And I saw you post I think it was like a race series or something that you were starting, and I thought
yeah,
must have her energy back if she's got this race series going. And so that's really wonderful to hear, especially going, the contrast of I don't know how you got on your bike in December, to say to be in that much pain and to still like be able to gather a shred of strength.
yeah. I think I was so frustrated with like getting like this 3-month cycle of seeing your specialist is hard. And I had like in October, October I was back in emergency, and then at beginning of October, and then at the end of October I was in urgent care because my left leg swelled up, like it was huge. Like you couldn't see, like it was 3 inches bigger than my other leg. It was just all inflammation. And my, my RA doctor just, they just weren't, they just didn't go to emergency, go deal with it, go to urgent care, right? Rule out a blood clot. So blood clot was ruled out, but it didn't explain what was going on with that leg. And my other leg wasn't the same. So rheumatoid arthritis, you should have the same on both sides. So that's what I got into a physiatrist, which is a physical medicine doctor. So he started to help me in terms of identifying what was going on with my legs. So then at that point I had two large cysts in my leg. I think one was 8 centimeters long and the other one was 6. So basically my whole leg. But one was in an abnormal place where you would normally see a cyst. And so they couldn't stick a needle in there to remove fluid because of the possibility that if they did that, if it was something that was cancerous, that it would spread. So I had to wait for an MRI. So I had this other complication now that, the possibility of possibly losing a limb, really coming down to it, right? And I think no one wanted to say that out loud. So there was this silence of that we need to determine what the cyst is composed of. And, the removal of that cyst, if it was required, but then, you look down the line, and if it's cancerous, then obviously it could be that I could lose a leg. And, so there was that, again, that just the dark period, and which led into that December, right? Like I just didn't get resolved. I was waiting for this MRI, and I think it was January that I got the MRI back, and got into an MRI, and I owe, that process to the physiatrist, and I still have issues with the left leg. The swelling has gone down, and but they ruled out that it was cancerous. It was just fluid, just the amount of inflammation from it. You get Baker's cysts when you have rheumatoid arthritis. So it was just this Baker's cyst, it burst, and then it created another one. The fluid just didn't have anywhere to go. But yeah, so the knee area is still quite swollen. I'll probably I'll have a follow up here with the physiatrist to kind of deal with that. I think once I straighten with it, they release some of the fluid in the knee, and possibly do a steroid injection to kind of move it along. That leg will start to work properly, but right now it really doesn't. I was so excited about my progress that prior to this week, last week or the week before, I thought I would, but I went out for my walk. I'd try to skip, so I was skipping. It felt so good to move in that motion, and I was skipping. I forget how I did like 30-second skips 10 times or something like that, and then I was so successful with that. I decided to try to run 30 seconds at a time, and it was painful. And probably the wrong thing to do, but I wanted to try. So I did that twice, and then I think I ran a couple times for 10 minutes. And but it gave me hope, I think. I think I needed to continue to, for me, it's about like doing different things to continue the string of hope, because I don't want to go back to feeling like I did in December. I think that would destroy a lot of people who rely on me for things. And so I think for me, it's trying to continue to go forward and trying to find the nuggets that continue to make me go forward. So being able to do that little bit of running was one of those nuggets. In February, it was like, I couldn't even lift my coffee cup prior to January. And so, being able to lift up, first it was a 5-pound weight, then it was a 10-pound weight. And then, I have a gym at home, and I have a trap bar. And to be able to lift the trap bar up and then put weight on it. And then, like, I used to be able to, deadlift 160 to 180 pounds. And, now I can deadlift like 100 and some now. But it came from starting with 5 pounds. So that's, just gives you an idea of like how much strength you lose, and you have to rebuild your body. And I'm doing that now. I'm trying to rebuild it while still being, in a flare. Yeah, I think I just need to continue to more nuggets, so I continue to have the hope that I'm gonna be able to, you know, lead an active lifestyle. And if I have to give up running, I've already come to that place where that's okay. But I need to be outside, and I need to be able to walk. I need to, you know, as I've turned older, I've been doing these bike trips, and so I'll cycle a country. So I've cycled all of New Zealand, North Island and South Island. Spent a month on my bike. Uh, Spent 10 days cycling in the Japanese Alps. Cycled across France. Cycled across Turkey and Greece. So for me, that was how I wanted to sort of lead my 60s and 70s, was to be able to be on my bike, because I was strong enough and fit enough, because that's the lifestyle I've led, to see the world by being active. And I spent 2 different years. I rented an apartment in Spain, and spent 8 weeks just immersed in the culture, getting lost on my bike, trying to find somebody that could speak English to put me back on my route so I could get back to my apartment in the middle of nowhere. But those things are all fun for me, and I want that back. And I'm hopeful that I'll get there. I mean, sound really strange, but it's from where I've been in the last 18 months. they're big steps, big step to still get there. I got so much more to move along yet. So yeah.
So let's set that goal. What's your
Yeah.
next trip you're going to take? And then you can send us pictures from your next bike trip when you get there.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to go back to Spain. I love Spain. I love the culture. I love the food. I love everything about it. So I want to be able to rent that apartment and be there knowing that I could do things and not be worried about my health. And be stranded in a place and try to figure out how to get home. I don't want to. I don't want to have that on my mind. I want to be confident. So yeah, and I'm not confident yet, but I'm trying. I'm trying so hard. Yeah. I think all the breakdowns and all the tears and struggles. I'm hoping that it's all worth it. Yeah.
And you know, how to suffer. You've suffered as an athlete. I mean, obviously not anywhere close to what you've now been through with the pain of rheumatoid arthritis, describing some of that. Your pain tolerance is probably quite a bit higher than most people. And so for you to explain the level of pain that you were in, I don't think a lot of people would be able to get through that and not be just permanently in the hospital or who knows. Um, and so um, I'm excited for you to get to Spain. And, I'm sure any of your athletes would get on a plane for you if you ever needed them to. But
Yeah.
I hope that you
I
can sit there and be confident enough to know that you won't need to make that phone call.
my I had coffee with my best friend Ryan on Saturday, and he said something to me that was your whole life has been prehab.
Has been what?
Prehab, pre-rehabilitation, right? Basically. So you got this, like you know how to do this. And he's 100% right. Like I can't imagine, he added to that. It goes, just imagine if somebody didn't lead the life that you did, they would be in bed. They wouldn't know how to do it. So, you know, you asked me who, in terms of mentorship of my coaching, I mean, geez, Elle taught me all that process to be process oriented. And I take that with my life, like my entire life now, it's a process. What are the steps? Work through it. Sometimes there's going to be a setback. Deal with the setback. Move forward. And I learned that resilience. And it started like way back when I was in my late 20s, right? Learning what resilience really is.
And I'm sure taking the big, if you thought about the big picture of this, it would overwhelm you. And so to be able to take the process and break it down and say, I'm not going to think about what this is and what it means and the level of pain, but to say, okay, we're taking this one day at a time, and here's a process, and here's the next step. And yeah, the setback is not going to crush you. You just have to keep moving through it. And um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you're training all those years, and your ability to use that in the situation that you're in now is a gift to have that the ability to work through that. Because again, I don't
Yeah.
think a lot of people would. I think they would have just given up, and they would be in a hospital or in bed. And I don't know how you get through that much pain. I've been through that much pain in childbirth temporarily, like for a few hours, not months. I don't know how you did it.
I'm thankful for, I talk about, like, when I coach, I talk about building your toolbox, and I have this toolbox of life. Uh, and so And I think, like for me, part of the reason I've started to talk about rheumatoid arthritis and what you go through is because I want other people to have hope and to find their own resilience and to take ownership of their process, because there's no one going to do it for you. No one's like, even like, you could find medical resources to help you along the way, but at the end of it, you need to go through so much work on your own, because it's not about the drug. It's about regaining yourself in the process. I don't know if that really makes sense, but you only have you at the end of the day. And no one can give you strength. You have to find that strength inside. Regardless of how hard it is, you gotta bring it to the surface, and you gotta fight. And I think for me, it's important that if people want to live a life, they gotta fight for it. We only
Yes,
get one life.
exciting.
Um, yeah. So I hope my legacy is that, more than anything, is that I taught somebody something by talking about what I've been through in my journey. Yeah.
I think when I used to run, it started when I was like 14, I think, when I first started running 10Ks. And I used to think like, I'd often think of Terry Fox when I was in pain in a race. And I'd think, like, seriously, Amy, shut up. You're not in pain. Like, and it would make me push harder. Or I'd think about people that were living on like one bowl of rice a day. That just somehow it made me stronger to be able to think about that. So not that I'm going to race again, because I have my own challenges with my feet, but I think a lot of people will think of you and how hard
Thank you.
you fought. Very hard, and I'm I'm grateful that you're still fighting and that you're still inspiring people. And thank you for sharing your story, and being vulnerable and being open, because it is hard, and it's not. I don't. Um, this is something that is out of your control. And I mean, you've made it within you've done what you can to control it, but having RA is not. I find the embarrassment part interesting, and that's with no judgment, but just that you would take it, that you would feel that, because it's something that you didn't ask for, you didn't, you know. Um, and I'm glad that you were able to be open and vulnerable with people, so they knew what was going on, and they could help you, because for you to be suffering through that by yourself, or thinking you had to hide it and just be strong. A lot of us, I think, do that with whatever we're going through in our lives, but it's the ability to share that can help um, others feel that they can be open about their own struggles, and also that they want to help you. You've helped so many people.
Yeah. I think I've grown a lot in this last year in terms of allowing people to see how, like, by allowing myself to be vulnerable, I opened up myself to show that even though I'm struggling, that it's a different type of strength. Like, I have a lot of strength, but this is like a strength of, it's courage, I guess. I think is that I'm showing that, or I feel that I've opened myself up, and that I'm fighting a different fight, and the strength looks different. Um, and a lot of that is that I'm just trying to continue to move forward regardless of how hard it is. And that takes a lot of courage. And it takes courage not to give up, I think. So I'm okay to cry now in front of people. I don't think I've ever really been able to do that. And that's allowed me to be stronger. Yeah. So I hope people gain something from.
Sure they will. I know I have.
Thank you, Amy.
Your strength is inspiring, and I don't think a lot of people could have gone through what you did and come out. And you're not quite out of it, but I hope that comes soon and that you can get to that
Yeah,
that
me too.
thing. Is there anything we've missed, or that I didn't ask you, or anything else you want to share about this journey? And
Yeah, I don't think so. I just I just I feel badly for people who are in the pipeline of who've been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis but haven't been able to see a rheumatoid arthritis doctor. I mean, there's a huge backlog in Canada of rheumatoid arthritis patients waiting to see a specialist to get on a biologic. I was fortunate because I was, well, fortunate, unfortunate at the same time. I was young. I had a whole life ahead of me. I was being diagnosed when I was in my early 40s. And, but there are people who are suffering, and there's a shortage of rheumatoid arthritis doctors. And the hope is that more doctors specialize in rheumatoid arthritis, and that we create more of an awareness of rheumatoid arthritis, because it's like a lot of people have rheumatoid arthritis. I don't think I ever knew how many people have rheumatoid arthritis. And getting on medication is really critical in the process. Getting on the really expensive medication, the biologics, is so important. And I mean, I wish the drugs were cheaper and more accessible. And there, and it, and just in general, I think it's frustrating that, like, when you go into emergency and you see your family doctor, people just don't know how to treat a rheumatoid arthritis patient. They don't know what to do, right? They want to help, but all they can do is really give you painkillers. They see the amount of pain, but they're really helpless in that situation. And I think being treated like as an athlete versus somebody who hasn't led the same lifestyle in the system, we're all kind of treated the same. And I've been reaching out to other athletes who, there's not a lot in Canada, that have rheumatoid arthritis, were diagnosed either before being on an Olympic team or during. So there's something that triggers us to get rheumatoid arthritis. And I don't think it's the same between the different types of patients, but we're all treated. And I think there's a lot of knowledge to be learned from somebody who has led a really active lifestyle, maybe pushed their immune system too much. Mm-hmm. And I really think that there's there's something to be gained by researching that, but there's no research out there. And so when someone like me has to figure out the process of regaining the lifestyle, like there's no one that can tell me if I should be running or if I should be lifting weights. I'm figuring it out on my own.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other message, is that if I figure it out, I want to write about it so that other people have an avenue that come from the same background as I do, because that information needs to be out there. So I think that would be the only thing that I would add.
Is there anything, for someone who's in bed, in pain, if you can go back to who you were when you were on the floor crying, in that level of pain, just wanting to quit, is there something you want to say to people when they're in that place? Is there anything you could say to them to bring them any hope in that moment?
Just move, and do one thing.
Mhm.
Just do one thing, because you'll get so much satisfaction from that accomplishment. No matter how long it took you or how painful it was to do that, it's a forward gesture. And that forward gesture is really what continues to allow you to do more things, more tasks. Uh, and so staying with having a few things that you can try to do, uh, and move through them and let your emotions be what they are. So if you have to cry, if you have to pound things, uh, or if you even have to give up on that task because you just weren't at the stage where you could do it, you just tried, and that trying creates confidence. And so build your confidence. It's really important to build your confidence so that you can keep going. Um, yeah, so I just think it's about staying in that process, having little things to do. I remember the first time I put sheets on my bed by myself. Man, I was so happy because I would have to call somebody that lives not too far from here to come and help me put my sheets on my bed. But to be able to do that on your own, even though it took me forever, I did it. And it sounds so ridiculous, but it was an accomplishment of a task. And that's rewarding.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
sharing
you.
so much. Um, I appreciate your vulnerability and openness with all of this. It's got to be hard, but I think it will help a lot of other people that are deep in that pain. And even if they don't have an autoimmune disease, it's inspiring to hear how hard you've worked through this and just those little tasks.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Thanks, Sandra.
Thanks very much for watching all the way to the end. If you like this content, we have 2 other recommendations. And don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And if you have some other friends and acquaintances that you think might benefit from the information, please share it with them.